What's up, everybody? Forgot to bring us in there. Oopsie. How's everybody doing? It's Thursday. We are a couple of hours away from the Thursday night kickoff, and we are talking about helping you preview the Commanders versus the Bengals. And this is nearing must-win territory, John. 0-2. I mean, we've seen the Bengals climb out of, big win-loss holes before, but this, home game, Ring of Honor. I mean, you kind of got to get this done, it feels like. So anyway, how you doing, bud?
I mean, nearing. I think I don't know if we've seen them come out of an 0-3 hole. 0-2,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a theory on like time travel. Like if it exists, if it gets invented in the future, we would have already found out by someone coming back in time. So I don't think that time travel like actually exists. But if it does in our lifetime, in my lifetime, I want to go back in time to like 2022 to 2024. And if I end up being in like the middle of September, I'll just walk up to a Cincinnati and be like, hey, the Bengals 0-2 with like a primetime game coming up. And be like, hey, yeah, how'd you know? Like, I just had a hunch. This is just, it's tradition at this point. And I guess they're going to have a primetime game in week 3 for the Ring of Honor in perpetuity. Maybe that was a deal that they made with the NFL, but it definitely lines up well.
Yeah. It's kind of a little bit of lather, rinse, repeat, I think, right? If you go back to, the 2022 season, right? You had the weird start with the Steelers game, the Cowboys game, and then you had the Jets in week 3 that the Bengals beat them, but then right after was that Thursday night game against the Dolphins, the scary one with Tua that kind of started the avalanche of unfortunate concussions that he's been suffering. But and then you had another what was it in 21 the Jaguars game that kind of got him off of his skid a little bit, and so now we're looking at a very similar thing here this week as the Bengals welcome in Washington and also welcome in a couple of Bengals legends to honor them at halftime. So we'll talk about that a little later too. But let's start with just kind of running down some things. There's been some updates on Sheldon Rankins, T. Higgins. They brought in another player. Where do you want to start, John, in terms of the bad? Let's start with the bad news. Let's get the bad news out of the way first.
Sure. Well, as everyone saw, both of the Bengals defensive tackles left Sunday's game with hamstring injuries. It's going around the team. Both BJ Hill, Sheldon Rankins, they are officially day-to-day, but neither one practiced Thursday, which is the first practice of the week. I believe Hill was on the rehab field, and I don't know if anyone saw Rankins out there, but anyway, neither one practiced. Neither one looks to be on track to play Monday night, even with that extra day of rest. Again, hamstring injuries, as we all know, can be tricky. It's better to be cautious rather than try to rush them back. So they were two of the players that didn't practice Thursday. The other was Tanner Hudson, who missed 2 practices last week, but was active for game day because Anthony, he's the backup long snapper. He's the emergency long snapper. And so long as he's able to take the field and do that one job, I think they will always have him active because they don't want to relive Clark Harris's bicep tearing at the worst possible moment. But other than that, I think everyone else practiced, which includes some guys that missed the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, so T. Higgins, right? That's one, and we'll I mean, fingers crossed that he can finally get going. And I mean, you mentioned the hamstring injuries for Hill and Rankins. I I mean, look what it's done to T. Higgins. He suffered it going into the first week, and he missed the first 2 games. So, I mean, these are, like you said, they're tricky. The team tends, and Zach Taylor and company tend to be pretty conservative in their approach of it. They don't want to, keep having these guys pop back up on the injury report with those things, as these things kind of do. So, it's a little bit of good news, bad news. We'll have to see as it goes with Higgins. One would think that maybe with that extra day and him kind of getting some work in, that he would be back, and that would be a big boost to the Bengals and their offense, who played overall pretty well last week. Some errors we talked about on the Aftermath episode early this week, but the other thing is a roster addition in Lawrence Guy, a veteran defensive tackle. The Bengals just need help. I think he will be a useful addition, obviously, but I don't know that it's necessarily star power, move the needle too much type of stuff. It's depth. It's necessary in the wake of the injuries, but I mean, he was a free agent out there still going into week 3, but I don't want to downplay that, because this is a need, and he has shown the ability to be an effective player on the inside of defensive lines.
If you wanted to put this on a scale, right, where if 0 is doing nothing to address the problem and a 10 is trading for Jonathan Allen right before you play the Commanders and getting the best defensive tackle on the team, this probably lands pretty cleanly as 5, because I feel like Lawrence Guy was probably the most well-known name on the market for defensive tackles. For those who don't know, he was teammates with Vontaze Burfict for Arizona State, so he goes back a long time. He was in the same draft class as Andy Dalton and AJ Green. He's been in the league for a while. He was released by the Patriots, who he played the majority of his now 14-year career with back in February. So he hasn't been on a team in several months, but according to Jeff Hobson, he did the typical, experienced veteran thing of just training all throughout the offseason to make sure that when an opportunity does arrive, he's in at least offseason shape and is able to contribute early. And that's, I guess, the hope for this week of working out on Monday or Tuesday this week, getting signed, and having 3 practices to see if he can actually play on Monday night. And obviously he wouldn't need to play, 50, 60 snaps as a starter, but entering this week, they had basically no depth aside from maybe some guys that they could bring up from the practice squad. And this is someone who's got well over 170 games of experience at multiple defensive line positions. And his calling card, has always been stopping the run, which is obviously their biggest weakness at that point. So definitely something that they needed, but like you said, doesn't move the needle too much other than just having another body there.
Looks like he's entering his 13th year, if I'm not mistaken. And he's got 17 sacks in his career, 507 total tackles, 271 of those solo, 63 quarterback hits. So, I mean, nothing that's just eye popping, but I mean, only two forced fumbles in his career, I believe. 9 passes defense, but like you said, a versatile guy. He's played some defensive end. He's been in the interior of lines, kind of done multiple different schemes and that sort of thing. A guy who really liked the signing is a good friend of the show, Mr. Mike Daniels. He seemed to be really, really into this signing for the Cincinnati Bengals, not only just because it's a need, but a little bit like Mike Daniels, where if you remember, Mike Daniels was a guy, he's an interior defensive lineman, but he moved around a lot too. So he may see not only kind of a similar situation with him, right? Mike Daniels was towards the tail end of his career when he was with the Bengals, had a good amount of success in the league, was on successful teams, and now can come in here, bring some veteran presence, be a locker room leader type of thing. So he probably sees a lot of parallels in terms of not only talent, versatility, but just opportunity for a player a lot like him.
Yeah, it makes sense, because Daniels, I believe, was 31 when he joined the Bengals, and Guy is going on 35. So, but, clearing away like the oldest player on the team, which didn't used to be the case when guys like Kevin Huber and Clark Harris were here. But man, Mike Daniels, he was a quality, even like you said, back half of his career, literally the end of his career, he was still pretty quality for a group that needed a lot of defensive tackle help. And even then, I think he was added during training camp when they suffered a lot of injuries at the position. Like, you remember in 2020, they even traded for Christian Covington, who played a lot that year just because they needed to. So unfortunately, this is like the second time in Lou Anarumo and Zach Taylor's tenure here, where just the defensive line has just been decimated with injuries, and they had success getting someone who obviously had a ton of experience in Daniels and was able to be fresh for that season where he played 11 games, and they're hoping the same with Guy, I guess. And I think the one thing that's interesting, though, Anthony, is the fact that they signed him to the active roster, the 53-man roster, and they had to cut KJ Henry to do that. And I would have thought that, considering, you would assume that Rankings and or Hill would be back within at least the next month, so you wouldn't expect them to be placed on injured reserve. But how long do they need Guy, I suppose, because they're going to get McKinley Jackson back in 2 weeks from injured reserve. I would have figured that they would have signed a guy like Guy. It's funny to say it like that. I would have figured they would have signed him to the practice squad and then elevated him to up to 3 times whenever they needed him, and then see where it goes from there. But just signing him to the active roster, it could indicate that they plan on having him for the entire season. Maybe they make some type of another move to fit someone in there. But I thought that was interesting, considering they're going to have guys coming back from injury pretty soon at the position.
Yeah, I hate to use the term, but I mean, it is a bit of a Band-Aid at a position that needs it. And obviously the differing parallel, or the non-parallel, between Mike Daniels and Lawrence Guy is the condition of the roster in which both of these guys entered the team. And Mike Daniels really asserted himself as a leader in that team, and, veteran presence, a team that was rebuilding, that sort of thing. This team has rebuilt. And so this is just, hey, we need some extra help. This is a good player. He can do some different things for us, and we need to get by here these next couple of weeks, and we'll see what happens at the interior of the defensive line from there. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of some news and notes as it goes with the roster, state of the roster, some injury updates, and or I don't know, just different things happening here. Again, you got that extra day, do the Bengals with the Monday night game coming up here. So hopefully that makes things a little easier for guys, certain guys' path back to the roster. I want to switch it up a little bit and kind of, there's been some very optimistic, encouraging, I don't know, interesting quotes from Joe Burrow this week on a number of different platforms, not only with the local Cincinnati media. He was on the Rich Eisen show as well this week. Some pretty candid points being made by him. One being, they're actually pretty pleased as to their performance. Obviously, they could have been better, but they were pretty pleased with their performance last week against the Chiefs. They thought they were pretty close. They think they're getting there. They're making nice strides these first 2 weeks. Didn't really have too much of an answer as it goes to the lack of success in the first 2 weeks. Kind of danced around that topic a little bit, it seemed, but for the most part, he at least, as the face of the franchise, appeared to be confident in this interview with Rich Eisen, not only just in himself. He laid out the fact that he has high expectations of himself, which is obviously, we all kind of knew that. And then, of course, just talked about how he feels that the team is in a good spot despite being 0-2. They feel good about things with their performance last week, and they think that they've got a formula here where they can start riding some momentum and collecting some wins.
I mean, at a certain point, I don't know if you're comfortable with this situation, but just having experience with it, I don't take Burrow as someone who ever really panics in general when he's in the position that he's in. But again, just being through this now, this is his third time. I think it's definitely more absorbable, I would say, from a team-wide perspective, and especially when your quarterback kind of has that attitude. It's almost like business as usual, where you kind of evaluate what you did in the previous years and how you're able to kind of get out from the hole that you dug yourself. And this very similar opportunities kind of pop back up. And I think he made a point of saying on Thursday that it's not frustration that he feels. Like, the frustration was kind of over with once Sunday passed, and you just move on and continue your weekly process of getting ready for the next game and everything like that. But there's obviously a lot of parallels with how the offense, at least this year, it seemed like it took a week to ramp up. In past years, it took a little bit more, which was, I guess, was the worry for this go around. If your offense doesn't look competent against the Chiefs and you lose, then there's a lot more panic, I think, that can leak into the team, at least externally. But that performance on Sunday, despite the loss, I think it did calm some nerves regarding the team as a whole. And you're never really going to see that anyways when Burrow is kind of the figurehead and he kind of speaks in the same cadence and the same volume regardless of how the team's doing. But I think in general, just being 0-2 again, it's like it's definitely frustrated at some aspect in some level, but at the same time, just being there before and knowing that you can come out as a winning team at the end of it, there's definitely some level of comfort with that, I would say.
Yeah. There's I've got company in the background here if you can see it. No space is sacred around here, John. I get booted to the garage, and then I try and have my little kingdom, and I can't seem to get it. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, and then we've got another comment here from Burrow on the weapons, and I'm really excited that we had this guy on right before the season, because he's starting to get some run. He's starting to play well, and all of this is, I don't want to say it's a pleasant surprise from a talent standpoint. We knew this guy was talented, but just from coming back from the injury so quickly and all of that, I think that's where the excitement level is at. And specifically on Eric All Jr. quote, I'm excited about his future. We have two guys that continue to get better. We'll talk about another in just a second. So Burrow, effusive with his praise with a couple of young players, rookies especially, that he is relying upon in the passing game. They had nice moments last week. They've had differing paths to the active roster and or getting on the field, getting significant snaps, but you're starting to see the trust from the coaching staff and the quarterback build with a couple of rookies here, all being one of them.
I mean, all right now is the Bengals' most valuable rookie, because his presence opens up things in the playbook that they just haven't been comfortable doing in Burrow's career. Like going back to his rookie season when you had, Eifert and Uzama, and then Uzama, Hurst, Irv Smith. It's always really just been one tight end that's been featured in the offense. And that's totally fine when you have a three-headed monster in Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. And now once the dynamic of the offense has changed and your personnel has changed and you made more investment in the tight end group, and having a guy like Eric All specifically, who's well-rounded and who's got to do a duality with him with both blocking and running, so he's not an obvious tell for the defense. Him playing early and often and being effective in both phases now makes the Bengals going into 12 personnel like an actual viable strategy that they can do. And he basically said, like in a very indirect way, that this is more or less something that just hasn't been possible. The full quote on 12 personnel from earlier today was, quote, "The usage of 12 could vary week to week depending on matchups and what we feel like the defense is going to give us in those situations. And we have the guys to make that decision this year. We have a lot of tight ends that we feel really good about putting them on the field, and they're going to make plays. So that's a luxury that we have this year." And that was the hope for the past 2 years, when everyone on defense is signaling in that, okay, the Bengals are going to have three receivers out here. They're going to try to run verticals, and we're just going to, put everything in front of us. And if you can have your quarterback going under center, and if you can build a run game through 12 personnel and then build a passing game off of that, that creates the long-awaited dynamic and evolution that the team had. And really, you can't all attribute it to Eric All, but the fact that he's got the athleticism to do both, where Mike Gesicki's mainly just a receiver and Drew Sample's mainly just a blocker who catches balls underneath. Eric All's versatility and his ability to be an all-around player at the position, it gives that dynamic. And I think that's why, Burrow's really excited about him, is really effusive with his praise.
So before we get to the next person that Burrow was heaping some compliments on, and that one's going to be, very relieving based on some things we've seen and heard in recent weeks around that player. But I want to say this, and you are spot on with the Bengals adding in this wrinkle of different personnel looks and the ability to kind of be less predictable on offense, right? I think that's just the big key. Just be less predictable in what you're doing and what you're showing. And you go back to last week, and man, I think it was the Yoshi second touchdown that kind of developed for a long time. All had a nice, I think it was that play. All had a very nice block on that play there. And so you see these nice flashes from him. The question I have, and I waver on this a little bit, if and when Higgins comes back, could be soon, whether it's this week, maybe next. Do they still keep going to this well and furthering to develop that 12 personnel well, getting all on the field more, or now because you do know what you get out of T. Higgins, and this offense operates out of a high, operates at a high efficiency with him in there. Do you keep going back to a little bit of your comfort level of what you've run, and not so much having this new personnel grouping that you've started to like seeing what you get out of it?
It's a fair question. I feel like with Higgins coming back, like his main value on top of just obviously being a great receiver, but he has a gravity to him that obviously takes defenders away from Jamar Chase, or at least it makes things more balanced. Because as good as the offense was at times against the Kansas City Chiefs, it's not sustainable when you have Jamar Chase being bracketed all throughout the game and him only having like 30 something yards on 40 catches or anything like that. So if there are opportunities where defenses are giving certain looks where you can have, your three receiver sets and you can have Yoshi in the slot, Higgins and Chase on the boundary, and maybe that's Gesicki or that's Eric All at tight end, like that's totally fine. Like it's not like it's going to be like a negative necessarily to still have those plays, throughout the game and whatnot. I just think that seeing how much it worked and how much it's worked through the first 2 weeks, it gives them the confidence to continue doing so. And we still have to remember that, like the coach speak and the Burrow speak, in the sense it's always going to be a week to week thing depending on which defense they face, and maybe some defenses, like for example, we could talk about the Washington matchup coming up, but like their biggest weakness is their secondary. They don't have the cornerbacks necessarily to go one-on-one against the Bengals, and that's going to be something that maybe impacts this game plan, where maybe we do see a little bit more 11 in the situation where Higgins comes back, and now you have two really competent receivers, and you can rotate a guy like Yoshi or maybe Trent Irwin in the slot, and you can feel more comfortable about those sets out there. So this could be a week where it might be more 11 than it was last week, but when you have the confidence and the proof of concept of 12 continuing to work both in the run and pass, it's going to continue to stay. And I think to your point with bringing Higgins back, like he was practicing all throughout camp when these personnel groupings were still being implemented and still being installed, right? So I feel like if he's on the field, like they could still run 12, and that can still be like a staple with the offense for sure.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it. That's the hope, is that week to week, maybe even drive half to half, drive to drive, what have you. You can mix and match and find different effective ways and have adjustments to not only the teams that you're seeing, maybe the scheme that you're seeing, that maybe there's some surprises from the opposing defense, that sort of thing. But the good news is Higgins appears to be coming back, at least if not this week, probably next, it looks like. Eric All contributing. And last week we had the big play that we've been craving from Jermaine Burton. Got out on the field, got some more looks with everything, had the big play that led to, I believe it was the second Yoshi touchdown late in the game there. So big play by him. And to continue on Burrow's quotes of not only the team, Eric All, but Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton has gotten exponentially better over the last couple of weeks, exponentially better. Burton expanded on that and responded to that by saying veteran Zach Moss, I guess, pulled him aside, or they had some sort of long chat about approach and, biding your time and doing the things that you need to do, that sort of thing. So there was some worry going into this year. Okay, what's going on with Burton? There's some rumblings about the study habits or game plan grasp, that sort of thing. But it sounds like he's doing the necessary things to catch up if that's what is indeed needed, and or change his focus. And it's being noticed by Joe Burrow, potentially the coaching staff. They rewarded him by getting him a few more snaps last week, and he came up with a big play.
It's very typical, I think, for people to push the panic button on a rookie, maybe even specifically a receiver.
Remember Jamar Chase?
Yeah, right. Like how a rookie does in this first training camp. It could be an Eric All situation where you go through with flying colors and you have a role immediately, and it could be something like Jermaine Burton, where you just have veterans ahead of you, and maybe it's not clicking immediately, and some stories come out about sleeping through meetings off some hearsay or whatever the case may be. And it's almost like a defining thing for these guys that they have to just unnecessarily kind of overcome, where I think the trajectory of Jermaine Burton has always kind of been the same, where maybe he wasn't going to be, immediate impact player right away, especially when you had Andre Yoshivaz making such a leap in his second offseason, and he's got more of the prominent role to start off the season. But just continuing to just grind in practice and continuing to get the reps with Burrow and everyone else and having those opportunities increase because of injuries. Like, I think this is a pretty expected trajectory for Burton. And that play specifically, watching it again, I believe it was I know it was play action. I don't know if it was out of shotgun or anything, but it was, I think, with 12 personnel on the field, and they kind of set that play up and sucked the safety kind of in towards the line of scrimmage, and that's how that one-on-one kind of created. So they identified an opportunity to get Burton to utilize his skill set, and it paid off with 47 yards. And the more plays like that happen, also building off of what he did in the preseason, the more chances he's going to get. And I think with Higgins coming back, how they continue to integrate him is going to be interesting, because with Higgins now back out there, he's going to be on the outside. I don't know if they trust Burton in the slot as much as maybe we would have expected when he was drafted, and how that role was like very unknown. So his playing time may be impacted by the fact that Higgins is now back, and that has to be something that they continue to work out. But yeah, I think as time was going to continue to go on, Burrow was going to have more trust in Burton. It's good to see that that's indeed verified through his words.
Yeah, and you mentioned the unclear future with Burton in the slot. I mean, it's also unclear because in spring, I know it's spring workouts and early summer workouts. I mean, he was dominating at different spots, right? And we were going, hey, this is going to hit the ground running right away. And he's kind of been relegated to backup boundary duty and even pushed down the depth chart pecking order, even with Higgins out of the lineup. So still encouraging stuff from Burrow on those two guys and from the tape on those two guys, especially last week. So you like to see that. Hopefully they kind of continue that growth trajectory as the season progresses here. It'd be nice to see them continue to contribute in big ways and continue to mature. And of course, go back a few weeks now. I think it was probably 3 weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago, where we had Eric All on. Go back and check out that interview. He sat with us for, I don't know, like 25 minutes or something right after practice. It's a fun chat. So go check that out. Speaking of checking out other content, you can get all of our stuff through the Believe podcast channel, the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, which has our show, The Orange and Black Insider. It has Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. It also has 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, and Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach, Matt Minnick, and Willie Lutz, all on your favorite audio streamer, the major audio platforms. You have to resubscribe to the Believe in Cincy channel. Go resubscribe to that. Leave us a review if you can. That would be fantastic. We appreciate that. If you like the video side of things, you may be watching us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that channel underneath John's side of the window there. There is a show icon. Click that, click the subscribe button, do the thumbs up thing, bell, all the things that we beg and plead for you to do to engage with us. We appreciate that. And of course, you can also catch live streams on Cincy Jungle's Facebook page and a number of Twitter accounts for live streams or videos after the fact. You can also keep it to cincyjungle.com and A to Z sports.com with John covering the Bengals and the AFC North. Both of those sites getting you all your news, opinions, updates, and podcasts, of course. So go check it out. We appreciate all of the support. We're trying to bring you stuff all throughout the week. Hopefully you are enjoying it. Let's go next to talking about the game itself coming up here, John, and little X's and O's, little key players, little things that the Bengals need to do. And I want to start with something that you noted just a few minutes ago, in that the Washington secondary, namely the cornerbacks, is an area to exploit. You've had, I don't want to say it, it's not really fair to say a slow start by Jamar Chase, because he's been bracketed with a ton of coverage, and the first game was just kind of a mess on offense, that sort of thing. And he was coming off of food poisoning himself. But statistically speaking, it has been a little bit of a slower start for him. You potentially get T. Higgins back, so now a little more attention potentially off of Chase and elsewhere. I think this is kind of the week for the big play, a little bit more higher statistical output on offense and the passing game.
Yeah, and as the Chiefs showed, like a combination of talent and scheme can do well in terms of bracketing and limiting a receiver like Chase. The Commanders, on the other hand, they don't have a Trent McDuffie, so it's going to be harder, even with like that type of mindset, to just constantly have a safety like Jeremy Chin over the top when you have Benjamin St. Just or Noah Igbenogany on the outside. Like there's going to be opportunities for Chase to have space for himself, and it's up to the Bengals as well to move him around and try to get him out of those situations where he doesn't constantly have two defenders on him at all times. But like you said, I mean, the presence of T. Higgins, even if he's out there for maybe half the game, right? Let's just hypothetically say that he's out there for 30-35 routes, 30-35 snaps or whatever. Having him one-on-one, like that's a key for Burrow to just be like, hey, like this is an obvious matchup here. And that's still Chase impacting the game positively. But I think it's going to come down to moving Chase in the slot a little bit more, utilizing him on some more pre-snap motion, and trying to, at least from the exit of the huddle right up to the snap, getting him that one-on-one that didn't exist a few seconds earlier. Because when he does have one-on-one against St. Justice or against the rookie and Mike Sanistrill in the slot, this is the platform for Chase to really pop off. And I think it honestly goes beyond just Jimmy's and Joe's. This is Monday Night Football, week 3, following a month of just him in the news for, let's be honest, not the best reasons, whether it be, penalties or contract negotiations, whatever the case may be. It's been a lot of distractions, and I'm sure that there's definitely a level of frustration that he has. But against this matchup, in this environment, in this setting, this is the perfect time for him to just reassert himself and be like, yeah, I'm the best receiver in the NFL. That's what he said right before the season started, and there's no better time for him to prove it than right now with his running mate T. Higgins back to take some of the attention off of him.
The place would be electric. Obviously, we know that if the big plays come, especially from Chase and especially through the air. Again, Higgins coming back, it's still an iffy proposition at this point. It seems more possible, obviously, this week now that he has practiced on the first day of practice as opposed to the previous weeks. But, this thing popped up kind of out of nowhere late before the first week, right? And so stranger things have happened. So, I think if Higgins is out there, obviously that's a big plus, not only for his own statistical output, but alleviating some of the stuff off of Chase. You now have this extra wrinkle we just talked about with the 12 personnel and using that a bit more. Eric All and company last week, as you mentioned, you had Drew Sample getting involved pretty early too in some creative ways. So you had some different wrinkles last week. But again, I think in terms of offense, what the Bengals want to do, they're going to want to exploit the mismatches that, at least on paper, between the Bengals receivers and those cornerbacks. It's obvious to always point out the opposing quarterback, right? It's always obvious to be like, well, what are you going to do with the opposing quarterback? Of course, you have to have a solid game plan. This week's a little different. Jayden Daniels is a highly athletic guy. He's played, I think for a rookie quarterback, I think he's played okay. He's played pretty well. The thing that obviously he brings is a dimension with the legs. And where I get a little concerned is what we were just talking about earlier with the interior of the defensive line. And then the element of him being able to use the legs to extend plays, get those yards. You look back to week 1 and Jacoby Brissett, a not nimble quarterback, was able to extend plays, get out of tackles. And, as rushes came in, he got pressured. He was able to turn stuff that should have been a loss, a stop, a 1-yard gain into something that was more like 5 or 7 yards and keep drives alive. Now you're talking about a more athletic, a more nimble guy in Jayden Daniels. You've got a battered defensive line by the Cincinnati Bengals. This is the one kind of area where I go, the Commanders are going to want to run the ball, right? They're going to want to run the ball. They've got talented running backs. I was just on a show last night that, they're saying that that's going to be the game plan, and Daniels is going to be a big part of that game plan, I think, which is going to be in an effort to keep Burrow and the Bengals offense on the sideline.
There's no doubt about it. And like it's a lazy scouting report to just say like he's going to scramble, but it's legitimately backed up by the tape and the numbers. Like, so just for reference here, 38% of the Bengals dropbacks with Joe Burrow this year have resulted in a target. 29% of the Commanders dropbacks have resulted in a target. It's the lowest in the league for Jayden Daniels. 36% of his dropbacks have been scrambles. 32% have been sacks. Only 4% are throwaways. So there is a 96% chance that Jayden Daniels is going to do something with the ball in terms of trying to move it forward. And the vast majority of the time, it's not been good. Either him getting sacked or putting his body in a precarious situation where he's getting a lot of yards on the ground. And I feel like that's going to be the thing that, like, it's going to frustrate the Bengals defense to some degree. Like, you can spy him with either like Akeem Davis-Gaither or Logan Wilson and try to keep him, within the numbers and whatnot, and not let him get outside at some point. But he's going to have some breakaway runs where he gains first downs. The question will be, like it was last week against the Giants, is he going to put his body on the line in harm's way? Because he almost exited the game, I believe, with like a rib injury, and he toughed it out. And I think the Commanders got a win in that one. But there are going to be frustrating moments, I think, for the Bengals defense in terms of just containing him. And they just want to make him a passer because that's the last thing that he's been trying to do this year compared to being sacked and trying to be, win as a runner. But yeah, like I think they're going to have rules for the Bengals defense in terms of trying to do that and trying to accomplish that. But Daniels is going to frustrate them at some point. But I think so far, like the fact that he's a rookie in his third game in this type of environment in prime time, it's going to be a lot. And there's going to be mistakes that they have to take advantage of. And that's probably the biggest key, where if Daniels tries to be a hero like he's been in the first 2 weeks, he's going to put the ball up for grabs, and the Bengals need to take advantage of that.
He's been careful with the ball through the air, at least. He did have 3 fumbles against Tampa there, but none last week against the Giants. Here's kind of the things that impress me. And granted, I haven't combed through all the tape with him or anything like that, but when you're a rookie and you haven't thrown an interception, and your debut as an NFL rookie quarterback, you have a completion percent of 70.8. And then the following week, you're teetering on 79.3 with a win, 23 of 29 for 226 yards. I mean, those are, and your ratings are 93.1 and 99.1. Now he also hasn't thrown a touchdown either. So he's not really moving the needle the other way all that much, but he's being careful with the ball, for the most part, completing passes, which at a high level. Now, you can question the big play, that sort of thing. He has a 32-yard completion in the first one and a 34-yard completion last week. So there's a couple of big plays in there, but not huge explosive plays. And then, of course, he's got, 26 carries and quick trying to do the math, I think 132 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So I mean, he's making some plays. He's taking care of the football, at least from a turnover and completion percentage perspective, for throwing the football. So I think that's kind of going to be the name of the game in this one for the Commanders is, don't do what, as odd as it sounds, don't do what Patrick Mahomes did last week. Take care of the football. Don't take the risky throws. Use the legs a bit more. And I wouldn't be surprised, too, if the Bengals maybe do a little bit of the same defensive game plan because of the mobility and running ability of Jayden Daniels to do some of the things that they do with Patrick Mahomes, the contained stuff, that sort of thing. But again, a player that you got to be aware of at all times because of that dual risk factor.
Yeah, I mean, Cliff Kingsbury is the offense coordinator. Everyone's very familiar with his style of offense. He ran Arizona's offense for many a year with Kyler Murray, and it's a lot of underneath stuff. Like I believe Jayden Daniels has only thrown 3 passes beyond 20 yards this season, which is kind of the same as Burrow, but I think for very different reasons. A lot of it has been either behind the line of scrimmage or within the first 5 yards, trying to take advantage of speed in the form of like De'Ami Brown and Terry McLaurin. And I think, McLaurin's usage has kind of come under question in this offense with this quarterback. So I think they're still figuring out what is working and what isn't. The Commanders also have some rookies that I think Bengals fans are also very familiar with. And Ben Sinnott at tight end, who's like a tight end / H-back / George Kittle type, if you will. And also Johnny Newton made his debut last week at defensive tackle. He was coming off of that foot injury. So there are some names here for the Commanders that are still very talented and can still make some impact plays on their own. But it all comes down to how Daniels kind of manages the game and what the game flow and game script kind of is. Like if they, get off to a fast start running the ball and taking advantage of the Bengals' biggest weakness, whether that's Daniels keeping it or giving it to Brian Robinson, who had over 100 yards against the Giants last week. Like that's an area where they can kind of, control the game and keep ahead of the six and everything else. And, on the other side of the ball, like the Commanders, like their biggest strength, I would say, is probably still their defensive line with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, and they have Bobby Wagner and a quality group of linebackers behind them. So, yeah, this is going to be a different week than it was last week. It's two very different opponents, and it's going to require two very different game plans. But as per usual, it all really comes down to how the opposing quarterback plays and if he can try to be mistake-free.
Big test for the Bengals interior offensive line for sure this week. And to your point too about, the high percentage throws or, try and use the speed, that sort of thing. I think it's also a little bit, let's not rattle the rookie early and let's get him into rhythm throws. Let's kind of build the confidence with the high completion stuff and try and get him in a rhythm that way. I mean, we've seen the disaster. I laugh and I don't mean it because it's not comical. It's just pretty sad, the disaster that has been the Bryce Young situation in Carolina and just how, not surrounding a quarterback with the right talent, the right game plan, building their confidence early can be devastating to their development. So I think that's what the Commanders are trying to do here. And I think that's what they'll try to do often. They're going to try and run the ball a lot. They're going to try and just keep the ball. They're going to play keep away, I think. So that's where I think as we go to kind of keys to the game, the Bengals they may not get the amount of possessions, especially because of the decimated. They may not get the amount of possessions they're accustomed to getting in this game. So the settling for field goals, the long drives that either stall out or you have to go for it on fourth, you don't get it, or you like I said, you settle for a field goal instead of a touchdown if you march all the way down there. That really can't happen, I don't think, this week. And it sounds weird to say because I think the Bengals are pretty decent favorites in this one and all of that, but it's kind of gonna have to kind of be high efficiency touchdown percentage for the Bengals. Scoring percentage most definitely, but touchdown percentage, because I just don't envision them getting the amount of drives. I do envision Washington kind of having some success on the ground and playing a bit of keep away.
I really love that point because it's a very common theme whenever
Thank
the Bengals are.
Thank you.
Jesus, I didn't think you'd be that surprised about me agreeing with you. But it's
No,
very.
I was excited.
It's a very common theme when the Bengals and Ravens play because the Ravens they try to have Lamar kind of do it all, and they try to build their offense through the ground game. And that you're only going to have if you don't start with the ball, for example, you may only have at most 3 possessions in the first half. Most likely it's going to be 2. And the Bengals, while they did settle for field goals last week, they scored, I think, on 6 of their 9 possessions, again, 9 true possessions, I should say, against the Chiefs, because the 10th one was just Burrow kneeling on the opposite goal line. And that is a formula for success more times than not. You're going to win when you put up that many scoring drives. But obviously, when 4 of those scoring drives are field goals, it is tough, like you said, when you have the ball less throughout the game. So, yeah, just red zone offense. I mean, it's a continuing theme with this team, and oftentimes it really is the Achilles heel of the offense, even when the protection's good, even when Burrow is looking really good between the 20s, finishing those drives and really just punching in at the goal line. That was, I think, a source of frustration for them last week, specifically with the run game, where you had Zach Moss kind of losing his footing. You didn't really have trust in Chase Brown in those situations, and now you're going up against maybe a more talented interior defensive line than you faced last week, and how much trust are you going to have in your interior offensive line to game push against really high quality players and good linebackers who have a lot of experience in this league. So how the red zone plan kind of evolves and changes from last week, or maybe it's more of the same where you're trying to have this drop back passing game against the weakness of the Commanders secondary. So I'm really interested to see how they kind of manage those situations where last week they just kind of fell a little bit short.
What's another key for you? I'm gonna hang it up. I mean, you applauded my point, so I'm gonna play with house money here, buddy. What's another key for you?
I I think Trey Hendrickson, he's on a crazy pace right now where
Yeah.
his pass rush win rate is like 39% according to ESPN, and his double team rate is like 30%, which is tied for second with Myles Garrett and right behind Chris Jones. So the production that he's having is immaculate and it's legitimate. And he's got another really good matchup against Cornelius Lucas, I want to say, is the Commanders left tackle. How they again like keep Daniels in the pocket and how they kind of corral to him, because in the times where he's not leaving, he's taking sacks nearly 30% of the time that he's pressured, which is not a very good and sustainable rate. It's very common for rookies, I would say, when you're dealing with pressure, but he has the athleticism to obviously escape and make something out of nothing. So playing Patrick Mahomes the previous week and seeing the success that Hendrickson had against the mismatch in left tackle, and how in general, like they did a pretty good job of keeping Mahomes in the pocket. And the couple times where he left, like Mahomes did Mahomes things and whatnot, but you're going up against obviously someone with significantly less experience and less talented in that regard. So I think playing the Chiefs first before you play Jayden Daniels, it gives you an idea of kind of the similar style of rush schemes that you can use, and just to see if he being Trey Hendrickson has any extra help, because without Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill, it's going to be tough for them to generate any type of interior pass rush. So maybe having Sam Hubbard slide inside, having more Joseph Osai out on the outside to replace him, just those guys being more productive in their roles is going to be key.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see an Osai breakout game, right? That would be awesome to see. And he's got the the kind of the speed and athleticism, that sort of thing, to kind of keep up with Daniels and his mobility. So not that the others don't. I just, I mean, Osai is a pretty good athlete. So I think a lot of people would like to see a nice breakout game from him, and obviously, him kind of continuing to contribute going forward here. So we're going to start wrapping things up. We had a few keys to the game. We got a few key players and or key position groups going forward. What do you see this one going, John? Prediction wise, what do you have? Are you going to it?
I am going to. This is my
Oh,
third consecutive Ring of Honor game that I'm going to be attending, and I'm going to be really excited to see Corey Dillon get his jacket, as well as Tim Crummer. I don't think I've ever seen him in person before, so that's going to be fun. But yeah, I'm going to go down there. So if you see me, say hi and whatever. It's the first time I guess I don't have to wear white because it's not a whiteout, so I can just wear a normal getup in that sense. I will stick with my rule of trying to predict the spread here. I think the Commanders maybe backdoor cover this. I think it's 7.5, and I could see it being like a 7-point game. Again, just like there's going to be moments of frustration for the Bengals defense. I feel like Jayden Daniels is going to do some crazy things with the ball in his hands, and I could see them putting up like 20 points in this game, just from just a really good run game against the Bengals' biggest weakness. But again, the Bengals' biggest strength is their passing game. It continues to be, and the Commanders' biggest weakness is their secondary. And I really do think that this is the opportunity for Jamar Chase with T. Higgins back. Jamar Chase having some more one-on-ones, moving him into the slot a little bit more, but just because you have that extra elite receiver on the outside and you have the flexibility to do that, I think you're going to find Jamar Chase be open a lot more in this game. And when that happens, it doesn't matter how much Joe Burrow loves his tight ends. He loves Jamar Chase a little bit more than everyone else. So I think Chase goes for over 100 yards in this game. He's only got like 97 on the season. So I think he pops off and the Bengals score 27 in a 27-20 victory.
yeah, I actually am pretty. First of all, I gotta pat myself. I wish I could find the article to pull it up, but I did a prop bets article on Cincy Jungle, just things to think about, and I did a score there. I don't know if anyone did it, but there was a prop bet that basically the odds were crazy if you guessed who won and by kind of what margin. And I said, hey, you may want to think about this 1 to 3 point margin here, and in the mid 20s for the Chiefs and the Bengals in this one, just based on history. And that's exactly where it ended up. So I was like, man, if I was a betting man, I would have probably listened to my own advice there a little bit, on the very rare time that I'm close. But on this one, I do think I'm kind of in agreement with you. I like 27-21, 28-23, and maybe that score, maybe the Bengals kind of keep it at bay and that late, and then maybe there's a little bit of a garbage time score to pull it in a little closer. but I do think that this is a one possession game of some kind, whether that's a full touchdown, 6 points, 4 points, something like that. I think the Bengals seemingly and unfortunately do well. Well, fortunately too, they do well with their backs against the wall a bit, right? Or when the chips seem to be stacked against them, they've lost too many games in a row. They've lost games maybe they shouldn't have. All of a sudden, that's when they get on a streak. And in these next handful of weeks, John, you have this game which appears to be winnable, right? You've got Carolina and Andy Dalton, right? The next week, you have the Ravens who are currently 0-2 after that. And then you have the Giants who are a mess right now after that. So this is where, and particularly with that division game sandwiched in all of these as well, this is where you can potentially go on start a nice run, get back to 4-2, 3-3, that sort of thing. And, start feeling better about things, but it starts with this one. I think the Bengals take care of it. I do think it's a one possession game like you, probably within the 4 to 7 point range.
And hey, Chris Zito, I think Washington will win if the Bengals don't score at least 3 touchdowns. Like if they're held with under 20 points, again, like I think the Bengals defense still has things to work out with their defensive tackles. And Lawrence Guy can keep, Zach Carter and J2 Tufele fresh, but that's still an area where Washington will have some success in this game. But yeah, like for all this talk that we've had this past week about offensive evolution and tight end usage and pre-snap motion and everything, the Bengals seem to have progressed from the Chiefs game. If none of that shows up this time, it doesn't matter how much hype you have from the Ring of Honor and everything. The Commanders can easily win this game. So it comes down. It really does come down to the offense just showing up and just continuing to have building blocks from how this season has started.
Yeah. Well, let's get to dropping the mic and getting on out of here. Part of it's going to be about the Ring of Honor. I just want to shout out Ref the District, a show that is a Washington Commander-centric show that John and I were invited to be on. Unfortunately, John had a prior engagement last night, so he couldn't be on it, but go check it out. I chatted with the guys for, about 15, 20 minutes. It was a good chat. Really nice set of guys. They're on the Believe Network as well. So go check that out. That was a lot of fun. And first time talking with them. The Bengals and Commanders paths don't cross very often. So we haven't had the chance to do that. We tried to get them back on to reciprocate tonight. They couldn't do it, but shout them out. And I do want to recognize, there's always, with the Ring of Honor guys, there are different memories for those of us who have followed the team, covered the team, etc., for years and years and years. Some of these guys played, where when we weren't around. Some of them played when we first became Bengals faithful and all of that. And some of them played right in the heyday, some of the best years of the Bengals teams, that sort of thing. For me, I just some of my earliest memories of the Bengals, revolve around Tim Krumrie. Unfortunately, the Super Bowl and the injury there, but just when I first started collecting trading cards as a kid, I remember getting Tim Krumrie cards in the late 80s, early 90s, that sort of thing. And I very valuable guy. Obviously came back and coached and was a, much loved guy, and for good reason. And the thing that always sticks out, I know there's a lot of games from Corey Dillon, namely everybody remembers the Denver Broncos record-setting game. At that point, I remember the rookie record-setting game a lot. That was on ESPN, I believe, and Boomer Esiason had taken over for quarterback that year, and it was just like a days of future past, right? I mean, between those two guys, it was the rookie, it was Boomer, and he just could not be tackled. He just could not. I mean, it was just, and all it was turn and give. And he, there was more than a handful of games with Corey Dillon, regardless of the condition of the roster, that he did that and did it at a high level. And that game always sticks out to me. I remember watching the highlights afterward on Sports Center, and Stuart Scott's animated phrases and everything that he would put to it. So I don't know. I just kind of strolling down memory lane with these guys getting enshrined this week. It's pretty cool stuff. And I just remember at different points in my following of the team and specific memories, or maybe even non-specific memories, just general ones for both of these guys. And obviously they've got a soft spot in a lot of Bengals fans' hearts.
Yeah, there's something to be said about a running back who everyone knew was going to get the ball, and they did everything they could to sell out to stop him. And you could still have issues doing that, even behind an offensive line that was really only, one or two guys deep in terms of being actually good. One of them being Willie Anderson. But, this comes at a great time with, Corey Dillon being one of the nominees for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's not the first time he's been nominee. It won't be the last time if he doesn't get in this year. But, just like it was with Ken Riley, just like it has been with Willie Anderson, just getting in the Ring of Honor is just a huge step towards building that resume towards maybe getting into the Hall of Fame. So it really does come at a great time. Also, when everyone in the NFL is just Mel Kiper's losing his mind about, defense is playing too high, when really the solution has been what it's always been: run the ball, force the safety down into the box. That's what defense did all the time when Corey Dillon was on the field. And again, it was still hard to stop. So his recognition comes at a great time. And obviously, like you talked about with Crumry, just the combination of having a more modern era guy with someone from the 80s and 70s in that area, just having both those together, I think is always a winning success for the Ring of Honor for sure.
And I mean, you mentioned Willie Anderson, Chad Johnson. These are guys now hopefully get their place in Canton. I think they're deserving. They may have to wait a little bit, but we've mentioned that I think they're deserving. But should be a good one this Monday night. I believe it's a doubleheader on Monday night, right? There's another game prior to it, so interesting set of circumstances there. But the Bengals take on the Commanders, and hopefully they get in the win column for the first time in 2024. I almost said 2024. And man, if they don't, I don't even want to put it in the universe, but if they don't, we're going to have a long conversation on that one. He is John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This has been the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Go subscribe to that through your favorite audio streamer. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Orange and Black Insider. And thanks for all the support you've shown this program and all of the shows across the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Take care. Enjoy yourselves this weekend. We got more shows coming at you, not only from us, but the other guys in our crew on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. John, enjoy yourself this Monday, my friend.
Thank you. See you guys later.